So I wanted to talk about how ancient cultures could have cut stone, and I think the one piece that everyone's missing is acid. So we know that acid can dissolve stone. There's plenty of videos online of people doing it. And I think when you look at the different big question marks in terms of how did they cut this stone, I think it can all be explained with acid. So for example, if you go to the unfinished obelisk, and there's the scoop marks, well, the scoop marks could easily be explained by them pouring acid down on the stone and then scooping the rock away with a shovel or something like that. We have the core drills. And this one's a big contention because of the feed rate at which they cut the drill was able to cut core out the core drill. But if you imagine having a drill that drips acid down on the rock and dissolves it ahead of the cutting action, then I think you can easily core out those core drills. When you look at the statues that are made out of super hard stone, I think it makes sense that they would soften them up a bit with acid and then be able to easily chip away the stone. When you look at what they did in Peru with the big stones that are polygonal and they're all interlocking with each other, I think it makes sense that they used acid in between the stones and rubbed the stones back and forth to cut them. I think everywhere you look in these mysteries, I think acid is the answer for how they cut the stone. Now, acid is easy enough to make. All you need to do is you take alcohol. To make alcohol, you ferment fruit. Then you take the alcohol and you ferment the alcohol and you get vinegar, acid, and then you can concentrate it as needed. This would be available to any primitive culture, I think. Now, going back to the stuff in Peru, I think this is the most complicated form of construction that there is. Because what's important is the steps to cutting the stone. What part do you cut first, what part do you cut second, and so on. And so my theory on how this works is that they would have had a mill. So you have a water wheel in the water. This gives you a spinning energy. And then we can easily convert that into a sawing energy. We know how to do that with sawmills. I won't go into the details of that, but you can convert the spinning energy into a sawing motion. And then you take the sawing motion and you hook onto a stone and move the stone back and forth. Now, what's interesting about this is that you only need however many stones the stone touches. Say in the regular case, you would have one stone. It touches the stone on the left, the right, the top, and the bottom. Just as an example, and I know there's other stones where they had more than that many touching, which is to explain it, you'd have 4 stones touching one stone. So you would only need 5 stones at this facility at a time. You bring in stones, you get the ones that line up as close as possible, and then you put them on each other and start rubbing them. And then you could use acid in here, or it might just be that the stone itself, you're using fire against fire, right? It's the same type of stone, so that's the same hardness. So using the same stone against itself, it would be able to cut. But they could have used acid as well to speed up the process, to make it go quicker. Then once you have, and I think there's evidence of this because you can see in some of the videos where they show where the stone walls have come apart a bit, and there's like a lip. There's a lip where the stones interlock to each other, and that's because of this grinding action. The stones were ground together, and it would have left this lip on the edge when they done that. Now, once you have the stones ground together, you have to move them to the job site where you're going to build the structure. So you have, say, 5 stones at a time at this water wheel facility at the mill. And then as a stone gets completed, it has all 4 sides of it done. Then you can move the stone out and get new stones in. So you're constantly feeding stones in. And then once you get to the job site, you have to stack the stones on top of each other. So I go into detail in other videos on how to stack the stones, but once you get them stacked on top of each other, there would be a problem of the face. The face wouldn't be aligned correctly. It would, because you had them grinding back and forth, the place where they locked in, that's when you would stop, when they locked into place. And that wouldn't necessarily be where the faces are lined up correctly. So then you have to do a final step of facing the stone. And you can see evidence of this in Egypt on one of the pyramids where they have this interlocking stone, and it's like carved down and flat in some spots, but in other spots it's all jagged and bumpy. And this is because you faced the stone at the end. That's the last step. And facing the stone, you could use acid to loosen the stone up and then make it easier to chip away. Or you could use, as I mentioned in another video, you could use steam power and use steam to break up the rock. But I think that's how they did the stuff in Peru. And then you see similar similar versions of it over the world. But I think that's how they would have done it. You grind the stones back and forth onto each other, and then get them to the job site and then face them. But yeah, that's my main theory. Now have uncovered recently this plant that has acid in it that I think they might have used. That's another way to get the acid, is through a plant extraction directly. You don't have to go through the alcohol vinegar method. You just get it directly from a plant. But yeah, I think that's the lost technology that we're seeing here, is that they use acid to soften the stone. And the more you look for it, the more you can see it in everything. How they're able to cut the super hard stone, how they're able to shape most of the stone that there was. It all comes down to acid.